I've owned the 2023 Nissan Z for over 1,000 miles, and dare I say, I am actually driving the vehicle instead of putting it in a bubble to hopefully sell in 10 years for make like $3,000. And over the past 1,000 miles, I have gotten the honeymoon phase out of my system. Now it's just a car. It's big, it's yellow, it's got 2 doors, and it's way too tall in the air. And I wanted to give you my honest opinions on the car so far, and also talk a little bit about what we're gonna do to the car, because it is going to get modified, but we needed to set some baseline. So I'm Alex, Alex.Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram. Let's jump right into it, okay? I've had the car since middle bit after May. And for the entirety of the summer, I've driven it as much as I possibly could. I've taken the car to Chicago for my wife and I's anniversary, got to drive a few hours there. I also took it to US Air in Wisconsin to get some baseline performance done around the go-kart track and the autocross track, which was an absolute best. I tried to drift it, which was an absolute disaster. But now we're getting into the fun part, which is building it. So, what's been my reaction so far in the public? People love the car. Normal everyday people love this car. They seem to turn heads just as harsh as they would when I drive around the gray F430. I mean, people love the color. Enthusiasts, they kind of hate it. Like, they look at it, they like it, they love the car, and the very first question that comes out of their mouth is, how much did you pay for it? Because they automatically are assuming that I paid above dealer price to get this car, which I just think is absolutely insane. And if that doesn't tell you that there's a problem with the dealer world right now, I don't know what will. But outside of that, it more so matters on how it's been for me. And I broke it up into a few different sections: the exterior of the car, the interior, the driving experience, the steering feel, and then overall just the performance of the car as it sits. So first things first, the exterior of the car. I'm gonna be honest, when I first got the car, it felt a little ugly to me. There's a few really key things about the design of this car that just threw me for a little bit of the loop. And I'm staring at the car right now, so I'll show you as I'm like looking at it. The front bumper has a weird indentation in the middle of it, which gives it this little like face, like this one. You know, like the one, it's besides the point. It just kind of gives it a different look, a look that I'm not super fond of. And in addition to that, when you put it to the side profile of the car in comparison to something like Becca's BMW M4, it looks super boring. It's very basic. There's only 2 real distinct creases on the side of the car to give the car any sort of aggressiveness. Outside of the front, I do like the headlights. I've absolutely fallen in love with them. I love the taillights. I love the 300ZX look. I think they absolutely crushed the back end of this car and the whole arch style, kind of long nose, short ass design, which I think is the favorite, best perfect design style you can possibly do. However, the interior of the car though, let's get into it. The interior of the car that people claim is a rebadged 370Z. I don't give a shit because I never owned one. What I can say is it's actually really nice, but there are some weird things in there. The piano back engine start stop, love it. Keep that, that's sick. Why the f did you have to take a traction control button and an H mode pattern shifter button from 2009 Nissan Maxima and put it into a 2023 car? It is the worst thing you could do. It was also the very first thing I even spotted when I opened the driver door to actually look at the car. I noticed the traction control button and I was like, ugh, is the rest of the car like this? The good news is it's not. It's an absolute fantastic interior. I love the car. I love the fact that there are no back seats, not just tiny back seats. Now, talking about the seats, I can usually sit in a car for maybe 2 to 3 hours before my ass starts to hurt. I am not a big boy. There's not a lot of meat on this tush, okay? There's a couple bits of bones and pieces, and for the most part, if I look sideways, I look like the hardcover version of Harry Potter, the first book. So, there's not a lot there for me, but I usually can last 2 to 3 hours. The Nissan Z seats suck. The driving experience of the car though is insanely different than what I was expecting. It feels like a 90s tuner car in terms of the torque curve. It is not there, and then it's there, and then it kicks you all the way in the throat until it's up to like 6,000 RPM. I don't care what you say about 400 horsepower not being a lot or 350 foot-pounds of torque not feeling like a lot. When I'm driving that car, it feels like a lot. There is a lot that goes on in that torque curve that I'd almost argue is too aggressive for a stock OEM setup for 90% of the population. I'm hoping that a tune comes out to actually mellow it out a little bit, because when you're just putzing around town, it's almost too aggressive. Like, it's beautiful and it's brutal. The shifting also feels very well connected, I would argue, when you're getting on it, but it is still almost too grand touring for me, especially considering how small the car is. And that's kind of the vibe of the whole car. I've talked about this before, but I thought maybe it would go away after driving it 1,000 miles, and it hasn't. There's a feeling of the car being like an up-modeled, up-trimmed version of what a Nissan Z should have been. I'm not convinced it should have come with all the bells and whistles that it did and all the creature comforts that it does, but it does, which feels great, but sometimes I feel like they also did that in the transmission and the powertrain and the tune of the car if you're just kind of putzing around with it. Finally, how's the steering? The steering feeling is a little bit weird for me still. I'm convinced that the car desperately needs different tires and different suspension, and it'll become a 9 out of 10 car no matter what you do with the rest of the car. I truly believe that, which is why we're going to do that and compare it at US Air. But the steering feel it almost feels a little floaty. And the best way I can describe it is this. 2 years ago, we got to go over to Ron Fellows Raceway. I got to drive a C8 Corvette. I got to learn how to drive the car from professional race car drivers for 2 days. It was awesome. I learned a lot. It was a blast. Thank you for sending me out there. Now, the only thing with that is as I was driving the car, the drivers taught me something really, really important. They said, Alex, when you turn the car in, especially on the C8 Corvette, you're gonna need to do a lot of trail braking to actually get the car to go into a corner the way that you want. And trail braking essentially just loads the front of the car so that you have more traction when you're turning. It's not necessarily anything fancier than that unless you want to be a pro, in which case you'll tell me in the comments and you'll tell me I'm an idiot. Trail braking helps cars that are typically really floaty in the front. I wasn't expecting that experience with a Nissan Z because the engine's in the front, it's a rear-wheel drive, it's not that big of a car, and it should be pretty well balanced. Yet for some reason when I'm driving the car, the front end does feel floaty. It feels like it's set up like this. I know it's set up like this, but it feels like it's set up like this, and I just can't get over it because I noticed that when I was driving it hard at US Air, where the front just was a little bit more exaggerated than I wanted to. And when I did lift, or when I put the gas down and the car did this, I could feel the steering just get loosey-goosey, like putting your hands in spaghetti meatballs that's still cold. So I didn't really like that too much. I think the suspension change is gonna fix it. So how would I rate these categories? Well, the exterior of the car for me gets an 8 out of 10, even after the honeymoon period. The interior, even though I'm not a huge fan of the seats and the 2 buttons, that's just me being a weenie baby, I give it a 9 out of 10. Driving experience of the car, 7 out of 10. Steering feel for the car, 6 out of 10 right now. Hopefully that changes. But how's the performance of the Z? I think as a whole, as a platform with not having to pay markup and knowing kind of how Nissans feel and drive and kind of their good stuff and some of their bad, I gave it a 9. I think it's actually a really fun car. I do enjoy it. I like the way it feels. Sure, there's some things that we can clean up and tighten up, but the whole point of Nissan, for me at least, has always been about you get this really solid platform and then you modify it. It never really comes out of the gate exactly how you want it to. And the things that I'm really complaining about outside of the interior buttons are all things we're gonna take care of anyway. So I'm excited to have this Nissan to actually get into it a little bit more. But you'll have to let me know whether you agree with my rating at all, because I know we've talked about it a few times. We've drag raced the car, we've set baselines on the car, but now it's time to build the car. So if you wanna see us do anything specific with the Nissan Z, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just gonna keep driving it and trying to learn how to drift a twin turbo 400 horsepower stock car because that didn't go so well. I'm Alex, AlexMartini with 2 underscores on Instagram. We will see you later. Love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.